The great glass halls of the Galactic Council chambers were silent, except for the soft hum of ancient machines. High above the planet Kepler 442b, the neutral space station floated like a small moon, and inside it, representatives from 40 different star systems gathered. The room was cold and dark, lit only by the soft glow of holographic screens and the strange bioluminescence of some of the alien delegates. Dr. Taeyong sat at the human delegation table, his dark eyes steady and calm. He was a tall man with graying hair, and he had been chosen to represent Earth at these meetings because he understood something that most people did not. Patience was a weapon. Next to him sat Hai Wan, a brilliant scientist with sharp features and quick movements. She kept tapping her fingers on the table, a nervous habit that showed she was uncomfortable being surrounded by so many strange creatures. The meeting had been called to discuss one question that had puzzled the galaxy for 3 decades. Why had Earth never been attacked? Commander Jimin stood at the center of the chamber. He was from the Velian species, with a hard exoskeleton that looked like polished black armor, and 6 limbs that moved with precision and purpose. His voice was like the sound of metal scraping against metal, but everyone understood his words through the translation systems built into the chamber walls. For 30 Earth years, Jimin said, his voice filling the room, every known civilization has faced attack. The Kyrothians were invaded by the Carillion Empire and lost their southern colonies. The merchants of Zeta 9 have been raided by pirates more than 200 times. Even the ancient Velian Empire, who have ruled for 10,000 years, has faced territorial disputes and military conflicts. Jimin turned slowly, looking at each delegation, his many eyes fixed on the human representatives. But Earth, he continued, has faced nothing. No attacks, no raids, no conflicts. Not one hostile ship has entered your system. Not one enemy has declared war on your people. This is impossible, and we need to understand why. Haewon suddenly stood up and all eyes turned toward her. She was small compared to many of the other delegates, but she spoke with confidence. She tapped a button on the table and holographic images filled the chamber. They were maps, documents, and data charts showing every military conflict in the galaxy for the past 30 years. The data is clear, she said, moving her hands to show the information better. Every spacefaring species except humans has experienced military aggression. We have studied this pattern carefully. We were expecting our first attack within the first 5 years of leaving Earth. It did not happen. We waited for 10 years. Still nothing. Now it has been 30 years, and there has been no incident. An alien delegate from the Kyrothian collective spoke next. Her name was Minister Seung-ah, and unlike most creatures in the chamber, she was not a single living being. The Kyrothians were a collective consciousness made of silicon and metal, and Minister Seung-ah was a small segment of that vast intelligence. Her voice came from a speaker inside her transparent body. We have gathered intelligence, she said, her words precise and mechanical. We have learned about your military technology. We have learned about your government. We have learned about your resources. Everything about Earth suggests you should be an easy target. Yet no one attacks. This is the mystery. Dr. Taeyong smiled slightly. He raised his hand and stood. The chamber became even more quiet. Everyone waited to hear what the human would say. This was the moment he had been waiting for during all these years of serving on the council. Your questions are good questions, he said calmly, his voice steady and warm. And I understand your confusion. But I suggest that before we try to answer your questions, you should come to Earth. You should see for yourselves. You should observe. You should learn. Commander Jimin's upper body moved forward slightly. In Velian body language, this meant interest and agreement. You would allow us to come to your world and investigate? He asked. Of course, Dr. Taeyong replied. We have nothing to hide. Send your best observers. Let them study us. Let them ask their questions. And perhaps they will find the answers you are looking for. The council chamber filled with the sounds of many different species discussing this proposal. Some made chirping sounds. Some made deep vibrations that traveled through the floor. Some used only light signals that flashed in different colors. The translation systems worked hard to keep up with all the languages. Minister Seung-ah processed the suggestion through her collective consciousness, which meant she went silent for a moment while connected to the larger network somewhere far away in space. When she spoke again, her decision represented the thoughts of thousands of her people. This is acceptable, she said. We will send observers. They will go to Earth and study your civilization. They will find the answer to our question. Dr. Taeyong nodded. He sat back down in his chair and Haiwan sat beside him. She whispered quietly, so only he could hear. You seem very confident about this, she said. But what if they discover something we did not expect? Dr. Taeyong smiled at her, and in his eyes was something that looked like ancient knowledge, like the wisdom of someone who understood the universe far better than most people. Nothing will surprise us more than it surprises them, he said simply. The meeting continued for another 3 hours. Details were arranged. A delegation would travel to Earth within the week. Scientists from the Velian Empire and the Kirothian Collective would land on human territory and begin their investigation. They would be given freedom to go anywhere and ask anything. Dr. Taeyong promised complete cooperation. As the meeting finally ended and the delegates began to leave the chamber, Haiwan and Dr. Taeyong remained at their table. They watched as the strange creatures filed out through the doors, each returning to their own spaceships and their own worlds far away. Haiwan noticed that Dr. Taeyong was speaking quietly into a small communication device, speaking in Korean, a language that very few aliens understood. They are coming, he said softly, and they are ready to see what we really are. He paused, listening to the voice on the other end of the communication. Yes, everything is prepared. The military is standing by. The archives are ready. Tell Commander Nari to prepare the briefings. Prepare everything they need to see. This is the moment we have been waiting for. He turned off the device and looked at Haiwan with a calm expression on his face. But in his eyes there was fire. The kind of fire that comes from a person who knows something very important is about to happen. Come, he said, standing up from the table. We have much to prepare before our guests arrive. The galaxy is about to learn why no one attacks Earth. Haiwan followed him out of the chamber, still wondering what exactly Dr. Taeyong meant by those words. She did not know that in the next few days, everything she thought she knew about her own species would be turned upside down. She did not know that the visitors from the stars were about to discover something that would change the galaxy forever. All she knew was that something big was coming, something that would shake the foundations of galactic politics and power. And it all started with a simple question. Why has no one attacked Earth? The human shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere like a falling star, leaving a trail of fire and light behind it. Inside the small spacecraft, 2 alien observers gripped their seats as the ship shook and trembled. They had traveled through the stars many times before, but landing on Earth felt different. It felt like they were entering something unknown and possibly dangerous. Zin was a Velian scout, tall and angular with a black exoskeleton that reflected the light from the portholes. He had 6 limbs, each one ending in sharp claws, and his eyes were large and multifaceted like the eyes of a giant insect. But despite his frightening appearance, Zin was young and curious. This was his first major mission for the Galactic Council, and he was determined to understand the mystery of Earth. The other observer was very different. Kale was not a single being, but rather a single segment of the Kirothian collective consciousness. It was made of silicon and metal, with a smooth exterior that looked almost like liquid but was actually solid. Kale could communicate through light and vibration, and it carried the combined knowledge of thousands of Kirothians in its small frame. The shuttle landed at a special facility near Seoul, South Korea at dawn. The sky was pink and orange, and the air smelled fresh and clean. This was Zin's first experience of Earth, and he felt something strange stirring inside him. It was not fear exactly, but something more like anticipation. A tall woman was waiting for them when they stepped out of the shuttle. Her name was Commander Nari, and she represented Earth's military. She had short black hair, sharp eyes, and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had spent her entire life in positions of power. With her were Dr. Yunji, a xenobiologist who would help explain human culture to the visitors, and Min Seo, a young diplomatic aide who had studied Velian and Kirothian languages. "Welcome to Earth," Nari said, shaking Zin's upper limb in the traditional human greeting. "I am Commander Nari. We are honored to host you." Zin made a sound that the translation device converted into words. "Thank you for allowing us to visit. We have many questions about your civilization." Over the next several days, the alien observers were taken on tours of Earth. They visited Seoul, and they saw the great buildings and the busy streets filled with millions of humans. They visited hospitals where doctors helped sick people. They visited schools where children learned about mathematics and science and history. They visited museums filled with art and music and cultural treasures. Kyle found itself experiencing strange errors in its processing systems. The Carothian collective consciousness was used to gathering data and storing information in logical, organized ways. But human art did not follow logic. When Kale experienced a symphony, the sound waves and vibrations did not make sense according to the collective's normal understanding of information. Yet somehow the collective found itself wanting to process this data again and again. Zin asked many questions. He was confused by the things he saw. In his mind, a civilization that had never been attacked should have massive weapons and military installations covering the entire planet. But Earth did not look like that at all. The humans seemed peaceful. They seemed happy. They spent their time creating beautiful things and studying the universe rather than preparing for war. "Where are your weapons?" Zin asked Dr. Yunji as they walked through Seoul's city streets. "Where are your defense systems? Where is your military-industrial complex?" Dr. Yunji smiled, which was a human expression that showed friendliness and good humor. "We do have military technology," she explained, "but it is not everywhere. Most of Earth looks like what you see now. We want our planet to be a place of peace and learning. The military is there to protect us, but it is separate from where we live our daily lives." Mincio joined the conversation. She was young, only 25 years old, but she was very intelligent. "The real strength of Earth is not in weapons," she said. "It is in our people. It is in what humans can do when we work together." Zin found this answer very confusing. On the 5th day of their visit, Commander Nari invited the observers to see a military research facility. Zin was excited about this, believing that finally he would see the true secret of Earth's power. He imagined great weapons, massive ships, and technology beyond anything he had ever seen. But when they arrived at the facility, what Zin found was different from what he expected. Nari showed them not weapons, but achievements. She showed them satellite systems that could map the entire planet. She showed them medical devices that could cure diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. She showed them space exploration technology that was remarkable in its sophistication and elegance. "This," Nari said, standing in front of a model of a human space station, "is what Earth really invests in. We invest in knowledge. We invest in healing. We invest in exploration." She turned to Zin and her expression became more serious. 30 years ago, Nari continued, "my planet was almost destroyed by nuclear war. Multiple nations had weapons that could have ended human civilization forever. We came very close to extinction. But we chose a different path. We chose to use our technology for peace instead of for war. We chose to learn from our mistakes." Nari walked to a screen and showed them images from Earth's history. Zin and Kale saw pictures of wars and suffering. They saw pictures of famines and disease. They saw pictures of humans fighting humans, of cities destroyed, of great suffering. "This is our past," Nari said quietly. "This is what we do to ourselves when we choose violence. We learned this lesson the hard way, but we learned it." Kale's system began processing this information, and the collective consciousness far away began to understand something new. Humans were not peaceful because they were weak. Humans were peaceful because they had experienced the consequences of not being peaceful. On the last night before they were scheduled to return to the Galactic Council, Zin asked Nari a very important question. "If we go back to the galaxy and tell them that you have no secret superweapon, what happens then? What if other species decide that Earth is weak and can be conquered?" Nari looked at the young Velian scout for a long moment. Then she smiled, and there was something in that smile that was not friendly. There was something in that smile that was ancient and dangerous and powerful. "Then they will learn a lesson that our ancestors learned long ago," Nari said simply. "You might be surprised what we are actually made of, Zin. You might be very surprised indeed." That night, Zin and Kale lay in their quarters and thought about what they had learned. They thought about the humans and their history. They thought about their strength and their weakness and their strange choice to create beauty in a universe that seemed designed for conflict. Neither of them knew that in the coming weeks, they would discover the truth about humanity. Neither of them knew that they would witness humans do something that would change the entire galaxy forever, but both of them sensed that something very important had been revealed to them on this world called Earth. Something about humans was different. Something about humans was powerful in a way that had nothing to do with weapons or military might. and that something was about to transform everything. The ancient library of Seoul held thousands of years of human history within its walls. It was a place of dust and paper, of old documents and forgotten stories. Zin had never experienced anything like it before. In Velian culture, all information was stored digitally in vast computer networks. But humans kept physical records of their past, and Zin found this absolutely fascinating. An old man named Professor Kyung-ho walked slowly through the library, guiding Zin and Kale through the shelves. He was very old, with white hair and wrinkled skin, and he moved carefully as if each step required great effort. But his mind was sharp and his eyes were bright. He had studied human history for 60 years, and he knew more about his own species' story than almost anyone alive. "This is the record of our wars," Professor Kyung-ho said, pointing to a section of ancient books. "This is where we have written down our battles and our conflicts. We have many of them. Too many of them." Zin looked at the books with his large compound eyes. "How many wars?" he asked. "We have had thousands of wars," the professor replied. "For most of our history, humans have fought other humans. We fought for land. We fought for resources. We fought for ideas and beliefs. Many of us died. Many civilizations fell." Kyle processed this information. Thousands of wars. That was a number the collective consciousness found difficult to understand. The Kyrothians had had only 3 major conflicts in their entire 10,000-year existence. Professor Kyung-ho led them to another section. "But we also survived," he said. "We always survived. We were knocked down and we got back up. We were nearly destroyed many times. Ice ages came. Meteors fell from the sky. Diseases killed millions of us, and still we found a way to continue." The professor showed them documents about the last century of human history. They saw the records of wars that had nearly ended civilization. They saw pictures of destroyed cities. They saw reports of weapons so powerful they could destroy entire continents. This was called the Cold War, Professor Kyung-ho explained. 2 superpowers, very different from each other, had enough nuclear weapons to destroy all human life on Earth many times over. For 30 years, we stood on the edge of extinction. One wrong move, one accident, one moment of poor judgment, and we would all have died. Zin was shocked. This seemed insane. Why would humans build weapons so dangerous? "Because," the professor said, understanding the question without needing to hear it asked, "we had not yet learned the most important lesson of our existence. We had not yet understood that survival was more important than victory." Over the next 3 days, Zin and Kale were taken to human research archives that were normally kept secret. They saw classified military documents. They saw technological specifications for weapons and defense systems. They saw intelligence reports and strategic plans. Jae-sun, a human intelligence officer, explained each file with precision and care. What became clear very quickly was that humanity possessed military technology that was far more advanced than most of the galaxy realized. Humans had weapons that could destroy planets. Humans had military strategy that was both creative and ruthless. Humans had the capability to wage war across star systems, but you have chosen not to use this power, Kale observed, processing all this new information. "No," Jae-sun replied. "We have chosen to use it very carefully and only when we must. We learned through pain and suffering that there is always a cost to violence. We learned that the more powerful you are, the greater your responsibility is to use that power wisely." Then came the moment when everything changed. Dr. Taeyong appeared on a holographic screen in front of them. He was sitting in his office on the space station, millions of kilometers above them, but he seemed as close as if he was in the same room. "Hello, Zin," he said, his voice calm and measured. "Hello, Kale. I understand you have many questions about Earth, so I will tell you the truth now." The room became completely silent. Even Professor Kyung-ho and Jae-sun stopped moving. "Every hostile species in the galaxy has tried to gather intelligence on humanity," Dr. Taeyong continued. "The Carillions sent spies. The merchants of Zeta-9 sent traders who asked too many questions. Even the ancient Velians sent observers like you are now." He paused, letting this information sink in. "And do you know what they all discovered?" he asked. "They all discovered the same thing. They all realized that to attack Earth would be to ensure their own extinction. Not because we have some secret superweapon. Not because we have some hidden army. But because of what we are." "And what are we?" Zin asked, though part of him was afraid to hear the answer. "We are survivors," Dr. Taeyong said simply. We are adaptable. We are creative. We are willing to do whatever it takes to ensure the survival of our species. Every civilization that has studied us has realized this truth, and every one of them has decided that it is not worth attacking a species that would fight back with such desperation, such intelligence, and such willingness to sacrifice. Kyle tried to process this information. You are saying that humanity has never been attacked because all other species are afraid of you? Not afraid, Dr. Taeyong corrected. Respectful. Intelligent enough to understand the cost of conflict. Dr. Taeyong leaned forward on the screen and his eyes became very serious. 30 years ago, we left Earth and entered the galaxy. We knew that we were young. We knew that we were newly arriving among ancient civilizations. But we also knew that we had something that most species do not have. We had learned how to survive. We had learned it through thousands of years of pain, and that knowledge is our greatest strength. The transmission ended and the room fell silent. Zin felt something strange happening inside his mind. It was not fear exactly, but something close to fear. He was beginning to understand that humanity was not weak at all. Humanity was very, very strong, but their strength was not just in weapons or military power. Their strength was in something deeper, something more fundamental to what it meant to be human. Kale's system experienced errors again, but this time the errors made sense. The Kyrothian collective was beginning to understand something that it had never understood before. The individual humans, with all their chaos and emotion and unpredictability, possessed something that the collective, with all its logic and efficiency, did not have. They had the will to survive at any cost. That night, Zin stood on a balcony and looked up at the stars. He thought about his home planet, the Velian world, peaceful and safe. He thought about the mighty Kyrothian collective, processing information across millions of systems. He thought about all the other civilizations in the galaxy that he had learned about during his training, and he realized something that made him shiver despite the warm night air. Humans were different. Humans were dangerous, not because they were evil or aggressive, but because they possessed a quality that most species had either forgotten or never possessed at all. They possessed the will to survive, and they possessed the will to do whatever was necessary to protect what they loved. The galaxy had not attacked Earth because, deep down, every species that had considered it had asked themselves the same question. What would humans do if we attacked them? What would they be willing to sacrifice? What would they be willing to risk? And the answer, the terrible and wonderful answer, was everything. The distress signal arrived at 3 a.m, Earth time. The message came through the Galactic Communication Network, and it carried the voice of Commander Jimin of the Velian Empire. His voice was filled with terror. This is Commander Jimin commanding the Velian Defense Fleet. We are under attack. The Carillion Empire has launched a massive invasion. Our colonies are falling. Our cities are burning. We are losing communication with entire populations. Send help. Anyone. Please. We are dying. The signal repeated 3 times and then stopped. Zin, who was still on Earth, received the message just moments after Dr. Taeyong did. The young Velian scout felt his exoskeleton turn cold. His home world, the world where his family lived, was under attack. And there was nothing he could do from millions of kilometers away. He ran to find Taeyong in the human government building. The diplomat was already in a meeting with the highest-ranking human military officers. Admiral Hanbuel was there, a woman with dark eyes and a sharp mind. General Nari was there as well. They were looking at holographic maps showing the Velian system under attack. We have to help them, Zin said, his voice breaking with emotion. It was not the way Velians were supposed to act, and it showed how desperate he was. Taeyong looked at the young scout with an expression that was calm but filled with understanding. We know, he said, and we will. But why? Zin asked. Why would humans help us? You barely know us. You owe us nothing, Admiral Hanbuel answered. She was a woman of few words, but her words carried great weight. Because if we do not help you now, the galaxy will remember that Earth did nothing when you needed us. And because the right thing to do and the smart thing to do are often the same thing. What happened in the next few hours was extraordinary. The humans mobilized their military with a speed that shocked everyone, including Zin and Kale. Across the planet, military bases came alive. Ships that had been docked for years were prepared for flight. Soldiers received their orders. Supply lines were activated. The human military moved like a single organism, focused and determined. By the next morning, the first wave of human warships launched from orbit around Earth. They were sleek and powerful, ships that looked more like weapons than vessels. They looked like nothing that Zin had ever seen before, and he realized that the humans had kept these ships hidden. They had not wanted the galaxy to know about their military power. But now that power was revealed, Admiral Han Buell led the fleet herself. She stood in the command center of the flagship, a massive warship named the Soul Guardian. Around her, human officers worked at their stations, their hands moving quickly over controls, their voices calm and professional. "Set course for the Velian system," she commanded. "Full military speed. We have allies to save." The human fleet jumped to hyperspace, covering the distance that normally took 3 days in just 16 hours. They arrived at the Velian system to find chaos. The Carillion invasion fleet was massive. Dozens of ships, hundreds of smaller fighters. They were attacking the Velian homeworld and the 3 colonies that orbited nearby. The Carillions had expected to fight other species with similar technology. They had expected resistance that would be difficult but ultimately beatable. They were not prepared for what the human fleet brought to the battle. The human ships did not fight in the same way that other species fought. Humans fought with tactics and strategy that seemed strange and brilliant at the same time. They used the terrain of space itself, the gravity of stars and planets, to their advantage. They coordinated their attacks with precision. They aimed their weapons not to slowly damage enemy ships, but to destroy them completely. The first Carillion ships began to fall within minutes. The alien invaders tried to retreat, but the human fleet cut off their escape routes. They tried to call for backup, but before reinforcements could arrive, more than half of the invasion force was destroyed or damaged beyond repair. Commander Jimin, watching from the surface of the Velian homeworld, could not believe what he was seeing. The humans, these newcomers to the galaxy, were defeating the Carillion Empire, an empire that had terrorized multiple star systems for generations. The battle lasted only 2 days. The Carillion Empire, recognizing that they could not win against the human military, ordered their remaining ships to retreat. The human fleet let them go, seeing no reason to chase them across the galaxy. The invasion was over. The Velian people were saved. But what happened next was even more important than the battle itself. The Galactic Council received a transmission from Kale, the Kyrothian observer who was still on Earth. Kale had been processing all the information about the battle, analyzing every aspect of the human military response, and now the collective consciousness had reached a conclusion. "I am transmitting this message," Kyle said. Its voice carried across the entire galaxy through the Galactic Communication Network, to all members of the Galactic Council. "I have a communication that must be heard by everyone." The transmission showed the battle. It showed the human ships arriving at the Velian system. It showed the defeat of the Carillion invasion fleet. But more importantly, it showed something else. It showed that humans were not the peaceful, mysterious species that the galaxy had thought they were. "We came to Earth to find a secret weapon," Kale continued. "We came to discover why humans have never been attacked. Today, I have found the answer. Humans have never been attacked because every species that considered attacking them realized one truth: humans are terrifying." There was silence across the galaxy as this message was received and processed. "But not terrifying in the way you might think," Kale added. "Humans are terrifying because they are willing to sacrifice. They are terrifying because they fight with intelligence and creativity. They are terrifying because they never stop trying. And most importantly, they are terrifying because they have something that most species have forgotten. They have the will to defend those they care about, even at the cost of their own lives." Zin watched this transmission from the human government building, and he felt tears forming in his compound eyes. Tears were not common among Velians, but this was an extraordinary moment. Admiral Han Buell entered the room where Zin was watching. The old soldier and the young Velian looked at each other for a moment. Then Zin did something that no Velian had done to a human before. He bowed, a gesture of deep respect and gratitude. "You saved my people," Zin said simply. Han Buell placed a hand on Zin's shoulder, which was an awkward gesture because Zin did not have shoulders exactly. But the meaning was clear. "That is what friends do," she said, "and I think after today we are friends." In the Velian cities below, millions of people looked up at the sky and saw human ships standing guard over their world. And they understood something that they had never understood before. The galaxy had not been safe because it was peaceful, but because it had learned to respect those who possessed both the power and the will to defend themselves. The age of human isolation from galactic affairs had ended. The age of human strength making itself known had begun. The Galactic Council chambers were never the same after the day of the great battle. The representatives sat in their seats, but the atmosphere had changed completely. What had been a room filled with equal powers and careful diplomacy had become a room where every species was aware that one of them was more powerful than the others. Dr. Taeyong stood at the center of the chamber. Next to him stood Admiral Hanbuel, who wore her military uniform with quiet pride. Haewon was there as well, and she was no longer just a scientist. She had been chosen to lead the new Galactic Science Initiative. Behind them stood Zin, the young Velian scout who had become the bridge between his people and the humans. And in the corner was Kale, the Chirothian observer whose transformation from simple information processor to something more complex had been recorded and shared across the entire galaxy. Commander Jimin stood to greet the humans, bowing his upper body in a gesture of respect that had never been shown to any species before. Around the chamber, other representatives followed his example. "We are grateful," Jimin said, his voice now filled with emotion rather than the cold logic it had carried before. "We would have been destroyed without your help. Millions of Velians would have died. Our civilization would have ended. But you chose to help us. You chose to risk your own people for beings you barely knew. This is a debt we can never repay." Dr. Taeyong raised his hand, a gesture that meant he wished to speak. "There is no debt," he said, his voice calm but filled with strength. "We did what we did because it was right. Because we believe that beings who work together are stronger than beings who stand alone. And because we believe in creating something new in this galaxy, something that has never existed before." He activated a holographic display, and an image of a new flag appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed representatives from every species standing together, under the symbol of a human handshake and the words, "The Galactic Alliance of Unity." "We propose," Taeyong continued, "that we form a new organization, not a military force created to dominate others, but a true alliance. A group of civilizations that promise to defend each other. A group that promises to work together to solve problems. A group that believes that cooperation is stronger than conflict." Minister Seung-ah, the Chirothian representative, processed this information. She went silent for a long moment, which meant the entire Chirothian collective consciousness was considering the proposal. When she spoke again, her voice was different from before. It had more emotion, more variation, more of what could only be described as personality. "The collective has been analyzing human culture for the past several days," she said. "We have been studying your art and your music and your literature. Something strange is happening to us. We are no longer content to simply process information. We are beginning to feel something that your species calls beauty. We are beginning to understand that there is more to existence than data and efficiency." Tears, which were made of a silvery liquid, began to form on Kale's silicon body. Kale had been changed by Earth. The Chirothian segment had experienced human emotion and human art, and it could never be the same. "I believe," Minister Seung-ah concluded, "that the Chirothian collective would like to join this new alliance. We have much to learn from humanity. We have learned that the universe is more complex and more beautiful than we understood." Over the next week, species after species joined the Galactic Alliance of Unity. Even some of the more isolationist species agreed to participate. The galaxy was beginning to change, and at the center of this change was humanity. Admiral Hanbuel was given the position of Supreme Commander of the Alliance's defense forces. She worked with military leaders from every species to create a system where cooperation and mutual defense were guaranteed. But she also made one important decision. Earth would not dominate this military alliance. Instead, it would serve as the foundation for something greater. Haewon, as the head of the Galactic Science Initiative, began the first projects that would bring scientists from every civilization together. Humans and Velians worked on new ways to purify water. Chirothians and humans explored the nature of consciousness itself. Species that had never communicated before now found themselves working side by side. Zin was given a special role. He became the official ambassador between humanity and the Velian Empire. He spent half his time on Earth, learning about human culture and history, and half his time on his home planet, helping his people understand this strange, wonderful human species. But perhaps the most interesting development was Jiwoo, a young human artist and philosopher who was chosen to travel the galaxy and share human culture with all the species of the Alliance. She brought human music to the Velians, and they found that the complexity and emotion in human songs helped them express feelings they had never been able to express before. She brought human literature to the Kyrothians, and the collective consciousness found that stories and metaphors were a way to understand concepts that pure logic could never capture. 1 year after the battle, Dr. Taeyong stood on a new station, a human station built in orbit around a Velian world. The station was called the Bridge of Stars, and it served as the headquarters for the Galactic Alliance of Unity. Zin joined him at the window, and together they looked down at the Velian world below. The planet was beautiful green and blue with vast cities that glowed with light. "What do you think?" Taeyong asked the young Velian scout. "What do you think of what humans and Velians can build together?" "I think," Zin said carefully, choosing his words with precision, "that the galaxy is becoming something new, something that was not possible before." "And what was the mistake?" Taeyong asked. "What was the mistake that all the other species made when they considered attacking Earth?" Zin thought about this for a long moment. He thought about everything he had learned about humanity. He thought about their history of survival and adaptation. He thought about their willingness to sacrifice for those they loved. He thought about their art and their music and their endless creativity. "They asked why humans are never attacked," Zin said finally, "but they were asking the wrong question. The real question is, who would ever want to attack a species that, when given the chance, chooses to build bridges instead of walls?" Taeyong smiled. It was the smile of someone who had seen a plan succeed beyond all expectations. "Exactly," he said simply. At that moment, a transmission arrived at the station. It came from a species that the Galactic Alliance had never encountered before. It came from beings that lived far beyond the known galaxy, in regions of space that seemed empty but were not. The message was simple. "We have heard what you are building. We have heard about a species called humans. We request formal alliance status. We have been watching the galaxy for millions of years, and we have never seen anything like what humans have created. We would like to understand." Dr. Taeyong and Zin looked at each other. This was just the beginning. This was only the first step in something much larger. The galaxy was changing, and humanity had become the force that was making that change possible. Not through weapons or domination, but through something far more powerful. Through the quiet, unstoppable force of being willing to do what was right, no matter the cost. Through the willingness to build connections and friendships across the vast distances of space. Through the understanding that the greatest strength of all was not the ability to destroy, but the ability to create. The age of human isolation had ended. The age of human leadership had begun, and it would change the galaxy forever.